Okay. Well, hello, good morning. I guess
Good
it's
morning.
noon. My name is Nicole Coppi. I'm the owner of Blue Heart Studio in San Antonio, Texas. I'm also a lead teacher. We teach yoga, Pilates, breath work, meditation. We hold space for ceremony. And I'm super excited to introduce Dr. Elaine Buckley. Dr. Elaine Buckley, why don't you tell us about yourself, what you do, and a little bit about what inspired you into this path?
Thank you, Nicole. I'm happy to be joining you for this conversation. Um, I have had a long career in working with people who are struggling with their emotions and how their emotions are interfering with their lives in one way or the other. And my role has always been to help them see that their emotions are really a tool to help them navigate their life. It's not something for them to um, push down or ignore or drink away or eat away. They're really instructive. They tell us something about what's going on and that we need to pay attention. And so a lot of my life work has been helping children and adults to see their emotions as navigating tools. And how is it that we express those emotions in a way that helps us to not get bogged down, not to get sick, and not to act out in ways that hurt ourselves or others? So I have always used the art when I am working with people. But in the last couple of years, I went and officially studied art at the Person Centered Art, Expressive Arts program in California, which is the program that Carl Rogers' daughter, Natalie Rogers, put together. And she kind of has an interesting background because her father, of course, was Dr. Carl Rogers, and he was the founder of Person Centered Therapy. Her mother was an artist. And so she sort of combined these two ways of working with people and created something called the Expressive Arts. And that's not just unique to Natalie Rogers. From the beginning of time, you can find evidence of people using drawings to both communicate with others, to record data in history, and also to just express what was going on in their world. So I have been intrigued with how it is that we as people process complex situations by using art, whether that's drama, clay, drawing, performance art, dance, a variety of ways. And I'm just amazed over and over how beautifully simple it is and how healing it is. Even if we don't completely understand how that happens, it does happen. So I'm really delighted, Nicole, that we get to have this discussion and invite people into this very intriguing world of being able to use the expressive arts to work through whatever issues come up in their lives.
Yeah, awesome. That what's really resonating with me is the idea that your emotions are in the I Rest Yoga Nidra path, which is the meditation that I teach, that your emotions are messengers. And the
Yes.
emotions are really, they're there because they're trying to tell you something about your experience. And they're not, your messengers are not going to go away until you make time and space to actually receive them as messengers and allow them to tell you what they're trying to tell you. So
Yes.
I definitely resonate with
Yes.
that. Absolutely. A question for you. Are you an artist?
I am not at all an artist. Um, and yet I produce art and express myself through art every day, sometimes several times a day. And trust me when I tell you, there is nothing that I produce that anyone has threatened to buy or been tempted to buy. That is not at all my purpose. And I'm very comfortable with that. I It's the act of creating the art that is the power. I have gotten very comfortable with not judging my creative process. What comes out, what is flowing through me is the magic, is the healing, and it isn't the product at all.
I mean, I really appreciate that because it seems like in society in general, we're so product driven.
Yes,
And it's all
right,
about like, oh, can we sell it? Like, how can we make money off of it? Or is it valuable? Is it beautiful? Like, those. So
right.
I love the fact that it's really process driven and not necessarily about the product. Um,
Right.
there's a lot of
And
help.
even for our own voices, evaluating it. Is this good? Is this, bad? Is this better than my other one? We just move through that and just move on in did something in me speak? Did something get to be expressed that I may not have even known needed to be expressed? That's just such a gift that you never know what your body is going to be able to say, which is one of the things, Nicole, that your work and my work have in common, in that there's so much knowledge in our bodies. And if given the opportunity to move and to listen to our bodies, a wealth of knowledge can be revealed and released, even without us understanding completely what it was. Things can be resolved. Um, and so that's really a very potent finding for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really great snapshot and a great picture of what you're trying to create. So that's like, that hits it right on the head. I think that's beautiful. So we're coming together. Dr. Buckley is going to be in Blue Heart Studio for a nice little collaboration that's called Embracing Transitions with Expressive Arts. And so you're basing this off of a book that you suggested to me and that I started reading kind of in preparation for this conversation and for what's coming up with the Expressive Arts workshop. Now, the book that you suggested was Transitions: Making Sense of Life's Changes by William Bridges. And I wanted to just kind of, toss the ball over to you and tell me what fascinates you about this book and about Dr. Bridges' work.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm glad that you enjoyed this book, and I recommend everybody get a copy of this. You can get this. It has literally been in print since 1980 and has been reprinted and reprinted. Now, let me also qualify that Dr. Bridges is not the only one who has written extensively about life transitions. This is a topic that you can Google it and find hundreds of authors and hundreds of references to this. This is a really critical part of human development that all of us probably need to stop and think about. Many cultures, many religions have ways that we stop and acknowledge developmental phases in our lives. And there's something about those rituals that is very important for human development. Some cultures are not as good at acknowledging those cultural moves when we move from one place in our life to another. On the other hand, there are so many transitions, Nicole, that happen in our lives that are not marked by a, a significant moment, like graduating from high school to what's next, um, getting a divorce, those kind of things that are marked by paperwork, a moment in time. But there are those kinds of transitions that happen in our lives daily where we see ourselves one way and then we don't see ourselves that way anymore. So, all of those little transitions and huge transitions are happening on a daily basis. The particular book that Nicole's talking about, Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes, came about when Dr. Bridges moved his family out from the city where he was working. It was in the New England area. He had been a professor and he wanted to go and live in the country, kind of live off the land. But he kind of missed the teaching part of it. So he put up some flyers and he said, joined me for a group on life changes, life transitions. And quite a few people showed up, and he was expecting the group that were people who had gone through a divorce, people who had retired, people who had the more obvious life transitions. What he was not expecting were people who had gotten promotions, people who had just had a baby, people who had just bought a house. And in other words, people whose dreams had come true. And they were struggling as well with life transitions. And he started to listen to folks and started to realize that there was some commonalities in the process of going through transitions, regardless of whether A, you chose the transition or not, and B, whether it was considered a positive or not. All transitions change something within us, whether the transition came before the change or the change came before the transition. Transitions never leave us unchanged. And the only thing that's different is that some of us just keep barreling through. I'm not going to pay any attention to these changes. I'm just going to keep going. And oftentimes, what happens with those individuals is you do hit the wall. You hit that midlife crisis. All right, I'm walking out on my family. I'm walking out on this job. I'm going to go buy the red convertible because they have disregarded all the transitions in their lives for years. And when it finally hits them, it's too much. They want to just completely walk away from everything. So there's many transitions that we all need to talk about. And at the bottom of all transitions, the very essence is loss because we've left something behind. It may even be something we're delighted to leave behind, but there still is loss attached to it. So that's part of what the process that Nicole and I want to look through when we have our retreat weekend is how do we look at all of these events differently, see the value in them, see the hidden aspects of them, and then go on to what do they teach us? And how do the expressive arts help us navigate and learn from them?
Yes, absolutely. The something that comes up when you talk about even like the small daily transitions. I think this is a fun little connection between the work that you do and the work that I do. Is I've always thought that yoga or like yogic practices like breath work or mantra, like long deep breathing, things like that are perfect for transitions throughout the day. Because if we look at just our day on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, we're transitioning all the time. We're in the car transitioning from work to home. We're transitioning from, home to work. Like we're really just in a set of transitions, putting on one hat, putting on another hat, whether it's the parent hat, the worker hat, the husband or wife hat. And it's like these practices of being able to take, long deep breaths while you're driving in the car, or to sing or to use mantra to just really find yourself more centered, is all. I mean, that's what for me yoga is all about. It's like taking the time in these little moment from moment to get more connected to myself, so that when I show up wearing another hat, when I show up as aunt, or when I show up as daughter, that I'm able to do that from a softer, more authentic place, versus
Yes.
one that's just very like, oh, and I was in traffic and this and kind of stressed out. So I've always thought that yoga was a really beautiful tool for transitions. Um,
Yes.
the book was so good. It almost at a certain point was, it's sometimes it felt like he was pointing out things that were very obvious, but there's like deep truth in that, right? Like within
Yes.
transition, there's an ending, there's a new beginning, there's a transition time, like all of these that he's setting up. It's like it's very obvious, but when we dig into it deeper, it's a lot of layers that come up through
Yes.
transition, specifically because of loss. And so I'm
Yes.
right there with you on, I mean, this book was fantastic. The thing I want to
And
bring,
Nicole, can I just add something in there too? Is that we don't live in a vacuum. So the people around us are also in transitions. And so when we live with our family members, and they're going through different transitions. Our children that live in our lives, and their lives are transitioning, and friendships are transitioning. And so, even giving them a framework to look at things like this gives them a little bit of um, control over what they can control, and then understanding what they can't about transitions, going to new schools, meeting new friends, losing friends. Um, I have been in the substance abuse prevention field for many, many years. And one of the things that has become so obvious to me many years ago is that at the bottom of so much substance abuse is grief,
Mhm.
and not acknowledged grief. And I'm not trying to say that expressive arts fixes everything, because so many things in life aren't fixable. But it's a matter of allowing us to land more softly, and to be gentle with ourselves, and to begin the process of getting some of those really heavy emotions out of our bodies. And they may be emotions from 50 years ago. You don't even know how much is still in our bodies.
Yeah.
So the transition part, when we think of it, we're not in isolation. We're working in a world of people in transitions, particularly now in our society, with the transitions going on geopolitically, climate wise. We're constantly reminded of all of the transitions. And some of those we chose, some of them we did not choose. And so, if there was ever a time to learn how to use expressive art on a daily basis, it would be now, I think.
Yes. The what I like about what you're saying is it kind of gives us a framework, right? It's like when we understand the process of change, like you said, we can give ourselves more grace, we can give ourselves more compassion, and it almost gives us expressive arts, yoga, they almost give us a channel. Right, a
Yes,
channel in which we can kind of like move through to move through some of these difficulties. And when we have a channel, those things that feel often out of our control, we seem to have a little more control over, which
absolutely.
may or may not be true, right? But as long as there's a channel in which we can kind of put our energy, like the expressive arts, I think that's where the magic kind of comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a huge need for therapy in our whole societies and around the world. I'm a therapist by discipline. I also know that talk therapy has a place, and expressive arts has another place.
Mhm.
And I heard, I wasn't at the concert, but Pearl Jam was playing in Australia a week or so ago. And evidently, Eddie Vedder said to the crowd, music helps us when words are not available to us. So sometimes things are just too difficult, or we can't even find the words. But the arts transcend words. And so, so many people are saved by the arts, um, just giving us that way to express it, um, even when you can't find the words yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to bring up a piece of the book, just a little excerpt of a reading that I found to be really interesting, and it's page 14. It's about old reactions to present day changes, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a reading here, but it helps to think back on old endings and to try to
Mhm.
recall the feelings and thoughts you had then. As you begin to remember your old reactions to endings, you're likely to realize that your old mindset is being reactivated in the present whenever something ends in your life. He continues, some of the feelings you experience today have nothing to do with the present ending, but are the product instead of the resonance set up between situations in your present and those in your past.
So true. He does a great job of describing that, deeply buried emotions that continually get triggered by things that don't have anything to do with it. And, sometimes you have those kind of reactions and you're like, wow, why was that so strong? This event didn't seem to be that significant. And then you realize, oh, it's tapping into lots and lots and lots of stuff that may or may not even seem related to you. Um, but that is such a powerful kind of connection that we really do believe as people that we are very cognitive and that we think through how we react to things. And I think we do, but I think we so much more feel our way through. And so even people who think that they are rational, underneath it, there's a lot of emotion.
Yeah. And he was also saying that like a little thing you could do to recognize how you close situations in your life is to
Yeah.
imagine how you are, what you do when you leave a party and how you leave the party. Are you one of these people who doesn't say goodbye at all and just leaves? Are you one of those people who says goodbye to one person? Are you one of those who is a long goodbye and has to say goodbye to everyone? And so I was curious and like just using that kind of little trick, like what kind of a person are you when you leave a party? Like what do your goodbyes look like?
Oh, I just like to slip out. I don't want to make um, a big deal of it. I always laugh when people talk about that. I don't know. You're probably not old enough, Nicole, but I am. There was an episode on Cheers when Diane Chambers is leaving. And she keeps saying, goodbye, all, goodbye. I will miss you all. And it's this very long goodbye. She finally walks out the door and she comes back for her coat. And it's just so painful to watch because she says goodbye forever. And so I always say to myself, oh no, I'm not going to be Diane Chambers. I'm just going to leave. So I think that's really how it is. I just want to slip out. Yeah. And that's the way I leave jobs too. I don't want those going away parties or any of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, see now I am Diane Chambers. Like I
Yeah.
am long goodbye. Like I sit and chat, like I say goodbye, and then another start conversation starts up, and then I have to break away from that conversation. When somebody leaves my house, I mean, I'll walk them to the door, and then I find myself walking them to the car, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And when it comes down to it, like that's how I am when I end relationships as well. Like there was that,
Interesting.
and I didn't realize any of this until I read this book. There's a quote, not from this book, from that I caught somewhere down the road, and it was like, "Let go or be dragged."
Oh, wow. What
And
an
I
image.
have been dragged, Elaine. Oh my gosh, I have been dragged. Like, I am one of those people in goodbyes in relationships, like my divorce. Like, I mean, I hung on and hung on and I hung on and I hung on. And I'm telling you, like, I was dragged. So, like, it's so true what he's saying. Like, how do you leave a party? Like, I'm a long goodbye. And I try to keep relationships as long as I can to
Yeah.
my own detriment.
Yes. And you know what, Nicole? I love the way you're describing it because it's not wrong. It's not right. It's just the way your pattern has been. And now your awareness of it, you may actively choose to do something different, but not maybe. It's just that awareness it just gives you so much more nuance in your own life about how you want to do things. Like you said, to your own detriment. Maybe that's something you want to do in the self-care is I'm not going to put myself second anymore. But that's again, it's our choice. And that's what I think is so neat about doing this kind of work for a weekend is saying, which of these things, now that I've kind of looked at them, do I want to look at in a different way and maybe make some different choices, but really understand where is it coming from? So yeah, that's a neat story. And there's something else that you talked about too, when you were talking about this information allowing you to come from an authentic place.
Mm.
Because I think that's really what you're speaking of when you're talking about looking at your patterns and interacting with people is really, that's what I think our goal is how authentic can I be to myself and to other people? It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being authentic to ourselves. For one thing, we save so much energy when we are just being what's true to ourselves. And we have to take time to figure out what that is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think awareness is key, right? Like we talk about all the time in the yogic practices, like in your meditations where you're putting your awareness, and in your physical practice where you're putting your awareness. And when we come into places like my long goodbyes, and once I start to bring awareness to it, then I have the power to change it. And then
Yes,
I have the power to make a different choice. Just as you're saying, choose myself versus, this lingering goodbye that's just dragging me through the mud.
right, right.
Another thing that I
You'd
found
make a
really,
great movie, though.
oh, jeez. And I'll tell you what, I've got a friend who I just met this year, and she is a quick goodbye. Like
Ah,
the first time that we ever hung out, she was a quick goodbye, and it left me feeling like, what did I do? Like,
right,
weird, like what's going on? Like, did I offend her? Like, does she not like me? Like, because she's like
right,
goodbye out, and I'm like,
right, right. Why'd she disappear? Yeah, right, right. And isn't that interesting? Because you do have to figure out, what does that mean for her? What does that behavior mean for her? I know what it means for me, but that doesn't mean it's her message too. Yeah,
yeah.
very interesting.
And she's
Yeah,
also she's also opened a door for me to practice quick goodbyes.
yes,
So now it's like when she gets off the phone, I'm like, all right, see ya. Like it's just like bye, click. It's no like,
right,
oh, and later, and it's just like bye.
right, right. But you can see how it's done differently if it's authentic for that person. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Nice,
And to
nice.
try it on for like, well, what does that feel for me? Like, how can I, like, what does it feel like for me to have a quick goodbye? Not
Right,
have to explain this or explain that, but just like, all right, see ya.
right, right, right. We're never finished growing, are we?
Yeah,
Never finished.
I love
Thank
it. I
goodness.
wouldn't have it any other way. I'll tell you what.
Right.
So another, I love this conversation. I think I almost want to ask everybody, like, how do you say goodbye? Or like, it makes it really interesting
Yeah.
to watch people's goodbyes as well. Now that this like piece of information, it's like how you do anything is how you do everything. And so
Right.
really interesting purview, if you will, in observation to others. Um, uh, the book talks about, Dr. Bridges talks about the pieces of the transition and the endings and the new beginnings, and he talks about something in the middle between an ending and a new beginning that's called a neutral zone.
Mhm.
And I thought that was so fascinating because I
Yes.
have been through many endings and new beginnings, and a neutral zone, I mean, it should be neutral, but it is very rarely neutral, right? Like
Right.
space when you have completed something, or whether it's like a completion of a job or of a relationship or a time of your life, or that awaiting time into the new beginning. While I would like it to be very like full of faith and full of joy and full of hope, a lot of time it's not neutral at all. It can be very anxiety ridden. It can be very like you're in confusion, you're in doubt. And so I thought it was so interesting that he had coined it a neutral zone, because I very rarely find myself in a neutral place during that time.
Absolutely. And I think this is another example of what you were just talking about, Nicole, where you were saying that, we have similar ways that we say goodbye. I think we have similar ways that we handle the neutral zone. And you did a good job of explaining that when things end, many times we just look very quickly to, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next relationship? What's the next job? What's the next anything? Because we do not like that period of nothingness. Partially because we define ourselves by our roles, by our relationships, by the place we live, by our hobbies. So when any of those things end, again, our choice or not, um, it can kind of leave us with, well, then who am I? if I'm not so and so's spouse, if I'm not in that hobby, if I don't do this for a living, who am I? How do I introduce myself to people? And it's such an uncomfortable place often that people hurry up and get another job, relationship, whatever. Here's the risk, though, of that. And this is not just Bridges work, this is a lot of people who do transitions work. We often quickly go and get something else and we recreate the same thing. It may not look like it on the outside initially, but after a short time, we realize, oh, we got another job that's almost identical to the one we had. Or we get in a relationship that's very similar to the one we just got out of. Now, this guy has brown hair instead of blonde hair, but he's pretty much the same dynamics. So, unless we take time and really honor that neutral zone and say, all right, I'm not that person I used to be. I don't know who I am yet. So, where am I? And let myself grow and develop in that neutral zone. We're going to go back and recreate the same. And that's where we do not grow. But we have to acknowledge the neutral zone is tough. It can be lonely. It can feel disconnected. Um, and it can be disorienting for people. But again, this is where acknowledging it, expressing it, this is where expressive arts is so helpful. Um, just acknowledge where we are. The thing about the neutral zone is you don't know how long it lasts. It could be a couple of days, it could be a couple of years. And so that is what's so hard about it. I am not a diver, but I have heard people say when they do deep sea diving, there can be a place that is so deep that you get disoriented as to whether you're swimming up or down. And that is what the neutral zone can be like, is that
Oh,
you really don't know. Am I swimming towards something or away from something, or am I just treading water? And it can be that stress provoking. So
that's a
that,
great, great metaphor. I mean, that's a fantastic
yeah,
metaphor. And it's like I'm having these like, and you just gave me this huge, like my mind just like opened and my heart just opened because the when it comes to the neutral zone, I got divorced in 2017. And I recognized right away that if I were to jump into another relationship, it would just be more of the same. And
right,
so, and I wanted time to heal and I wanted time to grow and I wanted time to mature so that when I got into a relationship, I didn't create the same ending that I had just had. Now,
right.
I was thinking maybe like, a couple of years I would be single. I am starting on year 8.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, and it's one of those things that it's like, and I keep telling myself, it's like, it's the woman I'm becoming, right? The woman
Yes,
becoming who wants a partner. It's not the woman that I am now. And it's like, there's a part of that and a piece of that that really does give me peace, even though I have no idea when it's going to come, how it's going to come, who it's going to be. So it's like, I'm recognizing my season that feels more like I mean, it's almost a better part of a decade at this point
yes,
a neutral zone.
yes, yes. And acknowledging that that is growth, not failure, not just doing nothing. You're doing meaningful things. It's just, and the world can be very judgmental. You know, why aren't you dating? Why aren't you this? Why are you that? But we are doing important stuff. It's like when people drive by a field and then nothing's planted in it. If you don't understand soil, you think, oh, that's just wasted. No, that's how the soil regenerates nutrients. If you overplant, the soil is depleted
Mhm.
and it's no good to anybody. So you really have to understand that life demands that we let things heal, and it takes time and it takes purpose. Um, So I think the neutral zone is really important. Bridges says that the United States of America is particularly bad at it, that we're a country that was sort of founded on, keep going, keep pushing through, don't sit around and wait, and that it's a tough message here for that kind of growth to just wait and let things be for a while. So it is a message we have to be aware of.
What I really like about this conversation is it reminds me a lot of meditation, right? Because when
Yes,
I sit down every day for my 20-minute meditation, it's a whole lot of not much, right?
right,
A whole lot of nothing. Like it's like nowhere to be, nowhere to go, nothing to do. It's just sitting. And it's like, but
right.
that sitting day after day after day, moment after moment after moment, what really starts to arise is this really our essential nature that is just this essential nature of peace. And it's like, it's not an emotion and it's not something that is to do, but it's just something that you become. It's a sense of being because you take the time to do nothing.
Yes, and it's kind of, oh gosh, it's almost counterintuitive, but you're right. It allows you to do everything else more purposefully, more spiritually, more centered. Um, but for those of us who have to-do list and checklist, it's like, well, where do I check off what I did? Because we didn't do anything except that we cleared the path to do everything else intentionally,
Yes, authentically.
authentically. Yes.
Beautiful. Yes.
Yes.
So something that was really calling to me into the book is this idea of 40s midlife crisis. And silly as it may seem, it never occurred to me that 40s was midlife, even though I suppose if you look at the average age in the United States, that's going to be somewhere in the 70s, that it is indeed
Yeah.
midlife, which
Right.
is wild. I just think of myself as midlife. Oh my gosh. But the what he was saying about the midlife crisis is that we really move from what are we doing to why are we doing it?
Right.
And I can see this like at 40 years old last year is when I opened Blue Heart Studio. And the
Mm.
reason that I did it is because I wanted to teach what I wanted to teach when I wanted to teach it. I didn't want to have to change a title or change a name. I wanted to be able to bridge my studies in Christian spirituality with my yogic practice. And I look around at my friends who are the same age as me, and I'm watching them wrestle with these same things, and I recognize it very clearly now as this change from what to why.
Yes. Yes. And that is what my dissertation was. It was studying people who had left very high paying careers to go to do a career that paid much less, but that was meaningful to them. Because I wanted to know what was their motivation. And it's kind of like, why the why? And it's a very interesting concept of people, I guess, realizing we won't live forever, and all the toys in the world that you buy uh, is not going to make it meaningful to you at the end of the day. Um, and so it is a really neat evolution to watch somebody go through that and say, okay, well, how do I make a contribution? How do I become more authentic? How do I voice what is my purpose on earth? Um,
Yeah, the search for meaning.
yes,
Our hearts are
definitely.
restless until they rest in you. So yeah, I hear
Yes.
that. I hear that. So we've been touching upon it a bit through the conversation, but in the workshop itself at Blue Heart, how will these two concepts of the expressive arts and transition, how are they going to be linked?
Well, the first thing is that I encourage anyone to come and enjoy this weekend. Bring a friend with you. Bring someone who you think these concepts of looking at transitions, looking at expressing yourself, looking at having these tools to take back into your life would help, would benefit. And come and know that this is going to be a really safe environment. People can speak as much as they'd like or not. People are not going to be put on the spot. You're not going to be asked to do performance of any sort. Um, but this will be a part where we learn some of these concepts of both transitions and of expressive arts. But we're going to also do so much hands on that you can explore this for yourself and look at what is it in your life has been the transitions that have maybe not completely played themselves out, not been completed. Or maybe it's a transition you're going through right now. We're going to look at how is it different when someone else chooses a transition for you versus one that you chose? And how does that feel? And we're going to look at how do you take these basic tools of expressive arts and go back into your life? How are some ways that you can implement it into your daily life? How can you implement it with your children? Um, because I am a therapist. I like talk therapy. I think it's very helpful. It can also be cost prohibitive for some people. So this is a tool that anyone can do. And you can do it with your kids. You can teach your kids to do it. When I worked in a middle school, I would oftentimes have kids that were sitting outside the principal's office, vice principal's office, because they were in trouble, and give them a clipboard and some paper and say, draw what happened, draw what's upsetting you right now. Because if nothing else, it wasn't so much that I wanted to get the true documentation. I wanted some of that emotion to come out on paper so that when it was time to address the authority figure, they had calmed themselves down a little bit because we all do better verbally when we've calmed ourselves down. I encourage people to take art into waiting rooms at hospitals. Draw things before you're getting ready to have a medical procedure. They let some of that unconscious understanding of what's happening in your body find a way out. The opportunities are really endless for this tool for you. And this is something that I think you would enjoy and that you would be able to take with you um, for the rest of your life.
And so I know there's going to be some discussion involved at the workshop, but what other tools are you bringing in terms of the expressive arts? Like what can people expect to actually be doing with their hands, doing with, doing with art and like what kind of, will there be clay? Will there be paper? Will there be pens? Like, what can we expect in that way?
Well, I will bring you an art journal that you'll be able to take with you. So, throughout the entire time that you're there, you will have the opportunity to work in that journal. It'll be yours. No one else will have access to it. You can do the art in it, whether that's pen and ink, whether that's paint, whether it's markers. Colored pencils are also very helpful because you can show intensity in a different way. Um, and then when it's finished, you can take that with you. Also, we'll journal in that same book. Um, we're on a no glitter policy, so we won't get to have glitter. Nicole has already told me no glitter. Um, but that doesn't mean you can't have glitter at home. Um, but we'll do as as much hands on, more hands on than we will talking. But like I said, you will be in control. This, if after we do the art and we'll have music, you will have the option to share what you want about your art. You'll also have the option to skip, to pass. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. Um, but you'll also notice that when people start to talk, sometimes they see things in their art that they didn't even see before. What will not happen is that no one will judge your art or analyze your art. There is a discipline called art therapy where therapists are trained to analyze what you do. That is not what this is. We do not do any analysis of art. You may look at it and say, that's interesting. That same symbol comes up every time I draw something or doodle something. So you may see that, but that's not something that we'll do. Um, you don't have to worry about, I'm not a good drawer. Don't worry about that because we're just creating what's ever inside us. It doesn't have to be good or bad or anything else. So I'll bring all the supplies. Um, you can bring things if you'd like to add to it, but I'll bring a lot of stuff.
Awesome. Excellent.
Collage. I'll bring some things for collage. You think that's not that interesting of a activity, and it actually ends up being very interesting. So we'll do that too.
Collage is my favorite. That's probably collage and coloring are two things that I have always done. I will always do. I think they're a blast to kind of take different images that speak to me and put them on a page.
Yes, and it's amazing, especially when you go in with an intentionality and you're like, "That's an interesting picture. Was that in there before?" Yeah, because it speaks to you. Yeah,
Awesome. So some of the logistics of the workshop, we're doing an in-studio weekend retreat Friday, January 24th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. And it continues Saturday, January 25th from 12 to 4:30 p.m.
right.
All right, $75 for the in-studio weekend retreat. And we'll have things posted to be able to ask any questions concerning the retreat and things like that. Be able to open up a line of communication if people have questions and things like that. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Bring what will make them comfortable. If they want to bring a pillow or a blanket or anything like that, I'll bring all the art supplies and the music and um, just bring an openness to find more authenticity for yourself and a gift of time and um, to walk away with some tools to be able to help you the rest of your life on whatever issues come up for all of us as people.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I can tell already, I'm really excited. I'll be there. That you have a depth to you and a wisdom to you that I think is really going to allow for people to dive in very deeply. And
Yes,
as a person who's held space for that kind of work before, I'm very excited for you to hold that space for me to take that deep dive. Um,
yes,
so I'm looking forward to the workshop. Thank you for meeting and thank you for being open to this and for bringing this to Blue Heart. I think this is incredible work that's really needed at this time, at this time in life, just in general, for so many different reasons.
absolutely, absolutely. We all, as a people, need both community and we need ways to move the emotions that we're feeling um, out so that we can get to a productive place for ourselves and for our world.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you everyone for listening and for watching. We're going to leave more details for how to get connected to both Blue Heart and to Dr. Buckley. So we hope to see you in studio for the Embracing Transitions and Expressive Arts workshop in January.